Deep Dive Film School makes no claim of ownership of the film footage used in this episode. The film footage is owned entirely by the copyright holders. Also, we're going to spoil the hell out of this movie, so this is your warning. Welcome to Deep Dive Film School!
Oh, this week we're going to get into that one scene from the 1987 Mel Brooks film, Spaceballs.
Let's dive on in. All right, everybody, I am Adam Sherlock.
And I'm Adam Pulcher.
And if you like what you see/hear, please like and subscribe. You can find us in all the spaces and places that people find good media. We do festivals, we do 101s, punishment reviews.
That's right.
And every other week, we give you a scene analysis.
That's right.
And a lot of times, you know, those can be heavy scenes. Literally, the last one we did was Viggo Mortensen being attacked in with nothing but a towel.
Naked Russian gang fight.
Yes, but then we're going to switch it up. And we're going to do Spaceballs this week, you guys.
Not? That's what we do here. So please like and subscribe. Like he said, these scene analysis are really fun. They really give us an opportunity not only to just kind of talk about the movie, but this scene specifically.
Yes.
Spaceballs, like, I questioned when I pulled this up. I'm like, is this the scene we should be doing?
I know. There's so many to choose from.
Because there's a million. Luckily, we see one of the other scenes I thought we were doing in the movie, in this scene.
In the scene.
We'll talk about that in a minute.
It's a double whammy.
You know, honestly, I would probably say it's either this or Young Frankenstein for his best film, or my favorite at least. And this one is just packed with jokes. And it's spoofing off Star Wars, obviously, and a variety of other things, but
and really this kind of send up of pretty big tentpole style movies was something he was doing a lot in the 80s. You know, obviously, as you said, Young Frankenstein. You also have like High Anxiety, which is his send up of Hitchcock. Mm-hmm. You had Blazing Saddles.
Yeah, I mean they're all prominently on display when we look at Mr.
Mr. Rental.
He makes sure that his movies are front and center. There.
Exactly. Now I will say that you know in talking about Mel Brooks and this sort of filmography of his, looking at things like whether you're talking about High Anxiety. Whether you're talking about Young Frankenstein or even going back to the producers, they were movies that were very sort of based within their own reality. So like Young Frankenstein is a monster movie, but with the exception of a couple of moments, it doesn't ever really stray away from that. Mm-hmm. And I think that both this, Spaceballs, and Blazing Saddles has more moments in it that would have felt at home in our surreal comedies festival, where it goes to these places where you're like, I don't know what this is. I don't know what this moment is. And this is a perfect example of that, where it's like these comedic hinging moments that we see sometimes in movies that feel so strange that they almost make, I refer to them as almost like the large Haldong collider of comedy, where the movie almost closes in on itself and collapses because what they're doing is so weird.
Yeah, it definitely gets out there. It's true. It is one of the more out there ones for him. But you're in space, so you can create the Statue of Liberty with a vacuum,
and completely,
it makes sense, I guess. Right?
But it's also the kind of thing where it's like the great news anchor fight in Anchorman, where you're like, that's insane, and like they even re-reference it of like, yeah, you killed a guy, Brick. You might need a safe house to stay in for a little while. It's like these moments where you're like, yeah, we're now not even like we're in the parking lot of this movie. We're so far off the map.
Absolutely.
But yeah, so that's why I wanted to do this moment in particular, because it's so bizarre.
It is, but it's so meta as well.
Oh, that's what I'm saying.
And it's really just like, it's one of his cleverest movies for sure.
Yes.
And I think Lord Helmet might be, Igor might contend with this a little bit, but it might be his best character as well.
It really is.
Rick Moranis in his prime. and just the biggest dumbass
and
ever.
the two different voices, the voice with the helmet down
Yes.
versus his regular voice with the helmet up, the whole thing of like how he has toys of all the characters that he's playing with, and having him and Princess Vespa make out with each other, all that kind of stuff it's so damn good.
And the result of their solution goes to Yogurt's thing later, the merchandising, because we have Spaceballs, the t-shirt, the lunchbox, all of that stuff,
the
right?
flamethrower,
and the movie.
Yeah.
And this scene where they actually are like, hey, we need to find, like, Lone Star and his people have crashed at this point in the movie, in the desert, and I think
can't find him.
I think they can't find him. And the Colonel comes up with this idea.
Colonel Sandurz.
Like, hey, Colonel Sandurz is his name. He spells it differently, but yes, it's Colonel Sandurz.
What's the matter, Colonel Sandurz? Chicken?
That's right.
Yeah.
Hilarious. But yeah, so he comes up with this idea. It's actually a genius idea if you think about it. And he's like, how are we doing this? We're in the middle of making it. And so it just turns on itself.
Yeah.
And like after I wrote all my notes, I was just like, yes, I'm so glad we did this scene.
Well, because you're right that it's like in that moment where he comes up with this genius idea of like, let's watch the movie. And, Lord Helmet literally breaks the fourth wall in that moment and looks beyond the camera and he's like, the hell are you talking about? We're filming it right now, right? And then through the rest of this sequence, Rick Moranis keeps looking back to the camera, like looking to the director.
Yeah, we
being
get like this Inception screen thing
layer
going
on
on.
layer on layer. And yeah, that whole and then to harken back to another joke that happens right before the scene starts, which is they're trying to find him on the radar dish. And he's looking at Mr. Radar, or he thinks he is, and he's like, what's all this bubbling and churning? He's like, no, that's Mr. Coffee, right? And that's where he gets his coffee, and he takes a drink, and so then that transfers over into Mr. Rental. So now we have Mr. Radar, Mr. Coffee, and Mr. Rental that's only full of Mel Brooks's films, which is just...
And all the Rockies. I don't know if you saw that.
Oh, are there?
Rockies, yeah.
I didn't see that.
It was like Rocky 7, 8, 9, 10. It just kept going.
But yeah, this idea of instant cassette tapes.
Yeah, what does he say? That there's been revolution in video home marketing.
Like the movie's already ready to rent before we finished making it, and then this
when is this? This is now.
And the simplest of we'll get to this, but first they start and it's at the beginning of the movie and it's the title crawl and he's like way too early. And then Colonel Sandurz is doing this, and it's like everything else in the movie, which is Colonel Sandurz has to yell out the order, or yell out the preparation for the order, then the orderly repeats it, then he gives the order. So prepare to fast forward.
Prepare to fast forward.
Fast forwarding. And it never gets old. And that's where we get to the part that you're talking about, which is where the Spaceball 1 goes to Plaid. Right, where the ship is going to go so fast, and then they overshoot Lone Star by like 100 million light years, and so then he has to pull the emergency brake.
That's right.
And that they're watching it again, and he's really salty that they're watching it.
Embarrassed. He's like, actually, never show this again as we're watching the movie. That's the meta. Honestly, the dialogue is really brilliant in this scene.
Completely,
if you think about it, because Moranis trying to understand how this is working is hilarious, because us as an audience, especially in 87, we're like, what? I've never seen this before.
Yeah.
They're like breaking the fourth wall. I don't think I knew what that was when I was 8 years old or 10 years old.
And they're breaking it over and over again, like almost inside of these nesting boxes. And that then the payoff is the simplest thing, which is just a live feed of the camera and what it's seeing, which anybody could do. You could have done that in 87 with your home camcorder, right? But the fact that he's like moving his hand in front of the screen and then looking back and forth, and he's like, the hell am I looking at? Right? Like that, like just the acting that's necessary for those two characters to do in that moment. And he's like, now. And he's doing all that with his hands, and you're watching him do it and on the little screen do it.
It's a shame he stopped doing movies. He's so funny.
I mean, really, and what's funny is he did the Leslie. It was really he did the Leslie Nielsen Dracula Dead and Loving It, and it just bombed, and rightfully so. I don't know what happened, but it wasn't good. I mean, and that was really his first failure there. I mean, even. It's not as good as any of these, but History of the World Part 1 is still really fun. Like, sure. I mean, it's a little more raunchy and silly, and definitely has the same sort of weird surrealism as maybe this or Blazing Saddles does. But again, it's like it just couldn't do it, and I don't know why. And then that was when he was like, "All right, I'm good." And then things like Hot Shots took over. And,
that's right.
You know, there was...
The spoofs became more prominent, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, and they were happening before this, too. You think about the Airplane movies and stuff like that.
That's like Kentucky Fried Movie.
Yeah. It's the Zucker brothers. Yeah. And those also have their own bizarre,
definitely,
you know, surrealism moments in that same way. But this in particular, like, you know, like you were saying, like, it's kind of... It's so meta that it goes to this new level. And I was trying to think...
And it's a 2-minute scene in the movie, which, like, that's so strange to think just... I don't know, we're talking about this pretty deeply, right?
Yeah.
Inside of this movie, but, like, there's no other parts like this in the movie that are, like, super meta. Maybe they break the fourth wall.
I mean, there's tiny moments, like... but nothing... Like you said, the merchandising stuff, that's another one of them. But
sure, but, like... yeah, I don't know. It's just a very creative little nugget, 2-minute nugget that you don't really think about in the moment. Like, I mean, obviously it's an effective scene, but it's also just I don't know. It's just a little different than the rest of the movie, and I don't know. I appreciated it.
Well, and I'm thinking of like the end of Blazing Saddles, where they eventually leave their own film lot, and then like fall into 10 other movies during this chase scene. Like that's another collapsing of the whole narrative, although it happens at the end of the movie, so you're like, we're never coming back from that. Mm-hmm. Whereas here, they throw away that plot point. Right? Again, it's like... it's
because they're trying to fit in all the jokes.
Yeah, I mean, I think about, you know, when we did our science fiction tropes 101, you know, 2 years ago or whatever, and this idea of, like, if you use time travel... like now you're in trouble because you could always use it to solve problems.
Yeah.
Unless you're in a movie like Spaceballs, where they never think to go back to watch the Spaceballs movie again to solve any of the future problems that happen later in the movie. Instead, they can just be like, well, we forgot about that we could use that, so it's gone now, right?
Yeah.
And that's really nice. I like that. The last thing I'll say about this is it, in a weird way, it's... a lot of the parts of the premise are different, other than the fact of reality kind of falling in on itself in this weird way. For some reason, this segment of the movie reminds me of a Mr. Show sketch, and I don't know if you ever saw it, where David Cross is hosting the pre-taped call-in show, where each new iteration of the pre-taped call-in show is like, no, you guys are calling in, but the live show right now that you're calling in for is about pets. Last week's show was about racism, but everybody's watching the pre-taped version, so they're calling in with their stories about racism. And then, like, as it goes through different iterations until it goes back to the very beginning, he gets more and more hair because he's less and less stressed about the show, till finally the last iteration is him being like, so this is the new pre-taped call-in show, and we hope it really works, you know? But the very first version you see of him, he's like losing his mind.
They did a good job in that show of being meta.
And also having weird universes that collapse on themselves.
Yeah, weird transitions,
yes. Yeah. So that's kind of why it reminded me of that flavor.
That's an interesting... I would have connected those two, but I can see where you're going there. Yeah, obviously just a classic, hilarious movie from the 80s. And the spoof is kind of its own genre, right? It's really kind of... You know, you're obviously paying homage to something usually, to some degree. So it's kind of its own thing.
I'd like to see it done well again. I think that unfortunately...
They stopped making them for a reason.
Well,
probably.
I think that the scary movie guys kind of killed it for a really long time. I do see little bits and pieces here and there. I really like the Dewey Cox Walk Hard.
Oh, it's funny.
Like, it's really funny, and it's a good job of that spoof of that genre of the biopic.
Yeah,
but otherwise, like, I think that the scary movies, epic movies, date movies, that whole, like, they were
Kinda
just like,
spoiled it.
remember Napoleon Dynamite, you idiot? Yeah. Here he is. He's in this movie, but he's breakdancing. How do you like that? And you're like, that's not really a spoof.
The nature of those movies, too, is you're playing on the current pop culture, and that doesn't always age well, right?
Oh, dude, if you haven't... I mean, it would actually be an interesting experiment to go back and watch one of those, like a date movie or something, that was doing so much touchstones of literally that 6 months that, like, if you watched it now, you'd go, I don't know who that character is supposed to be. And then an hour later, you go... Oh, that was like a catchphrase from a TV show that like Carmen Electra was on for a year, right? But you're like, I don't remember the show, but the movie made a reference to it, and I don't even know what it was supposed to be.
Yeah, it's definitely something that's gone away. Interesting to think about, but I have always considered those kind of their own thing.
Completely.
So, anyways, thank you so much for watching and listening. Next week we're going to begin our food movie festival.
Yes.
Can't wait for this one. We're going to start with Chef, the Jon Favreau movie.
Yes.
And so please like and subscribe, play along, and yeah, we'll see you soon.
Bye, you guys.
Thanks, everyone.